Now, on to the main story of the day, and it's an investigation by our colleague Nick Summerlad into Tory MPs who sold a house, and they now have questions to answer about whether or not they paid capital gains tax on it, or if they should. Now, Kevin, can you take us through this a bit? Because most of us, if we sell up, you don't have to worry about capital gains tax. Why might these Tories have to do exactly that?
Yeah, if you sell the home you live in and it's your main home, you don't pay capital gains tax. If you've got second, third, fourth homes and you sell them, you do pay capital gains tax. The Tories have gone after Angela Rayner because she sold the former council house she'd bought 2015, and they've come up with calculations saying, oh, she should have been eligible for £1,500 council tax. Now she says no, it was where I lived. So I didn't have to pay capital gain tax. But they've gone and said, produce the evidence. Where is it? Show us everything. And the police have launched an inquiry under Tory lobbying. The Chief Constable of Greater Manchester buckled under the pressure of the Tories. I'm sure it's nothing to do with him going to speak at a very hard right fringe meeting at a Tory conference. I'm sure it's nothing to do with that. That's no indication of where he's coming at all. It's peripheral, collateral information I didn't need to tell you. I'm sure it has nothing to do with it. Anyway, he's launched this inquiry, and the Tories will say, come on, come clean, show all your evidence. Well, Nick Summerlad, our super sleuth investigations editor, has gone to 4 Tories who sold houses they bought with taxpayers' money, because it used to be, until after the expenses scandal changed in 2010, you could buy a house and claim the mortgage interest relief as on your expenses, and then when you sold the house, you could pocket the gain. But he's asked 4 of them who made big gains, 5.4 million between them, whether they paid capital gains tax. None of them will say. None of them say. David Trederick, profit 2 million or so. Eleanor Lang, Deputy Speaker at the moment, profit 0.6 million, won't say. Shailesh Vara, 1.6 million profit, won't say. Maria Miller, former Culture Minister, profit 1.2 million, won't say. Now, and even though they've broken the law, but they will not say. And yet they keep putting all this pressure on Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader. Go on, produce documents, show everything. Well, hang on. Sunak, he's raised it twice in Prime Minister's questions. Well, maybe he should be calling in his MPs, one's a former MP now, and actually finding out whether they've put their own house, see what I've done there? Their own house in order.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so you've got this situation where if you have a home that is the second home, and this is what they've been trying to prove about Angela Rayner, isn't it, over the past month? So that basically that she wasn't living there, she was living with her husband down the road in a different house, and that she was somehow bilking the taxpayer for the enormous crushing sum of £1,500, maybe as much as £3,000, because when she sold it, it was not her official main home, and they're saying that it was actually her second home, and therefore there was a dodge. But with these MPs, because they flipped their primary and secondary home designations for purposes of claiming parliamentary expenses, they have done the taxpayer perhaps for far more, because they had to flip it in order to claim the mortgage interest, and then it depends which way the flip was, where you had to pay capital gains tax when you sold it.
Yeah, they may not have flipped, because flipping was when you just change for financial advantage your designation. So they may have always just said, look, this is the house I'm claiming on because my main residence is elsewhere. Either
in that case, if they were being honest, they paid capital gains tax, and they could tell us, couldn't they?
Yeah. Well, no, that's right. And look, Angela Rayner paid her own mortgage. Taxpayers didn't pay Angela Rayner her mortgage. She was, at the time, she was a low-paid carer. She's a great British success story. The woman from a very difficult home with a mentally ill mother who fed them cat food. They had to go to their nanas to have a bath at the weekend. She leaves school at 16, no qualifications, a baby on its way. She gets a job, works her way up, absolutely fantastic. But there's been a lot of snobbery in the attacks on her. You can see how it is motivated by them. But these Tories, they bought their houses with our money, taxpayers' money, and they will not say whether they paid capital gains. Now, you might say, and Maria Miller, former Culture Secretary, Hampshire MP, she says, well, it's a long-standing convention. MPs don't have to talk about their personal tax affairs. Well, okay, that's a long-standing convention. Why are you Tory hounds going after Angela Rayner the way you are? The hypocrisy then just becomes absolutely glaring. All right. Some of the questions of Angela Rayner I wouldn't object to as a journalist. I think they can be legitimate, but there's a sense of proportionality, and also why do they keep going on at her in this way? And we know why they do it. They're just doing it for party political purposes, to try and damage her, undermine her. The Tory party has been absolutely riddled with sleaze. Here we got a Tory MP standing down because bad people had to be paid $6.5 grand in the middle of the night to free them. Blackpool South by-election was gained by Labour, lost by the Tories, because basically the Tory MP had wanted money to help the gambling industry. You've had tractor porn, you've had lobbying. I mean, you just go on and on and on. You couldn't make it up. In fact, the amount of
who would make up tractor porn? I mean, that's a niche area. One would have thought. Brian thinks he knows why this is happening. Angela's a huge threat to the Tories, hence why they're doing everything they can to get her discredited. Now, what do you think? Do you think it matters whether these MPs and whether they've paid capital gains tax on a home that may have been their second or not? But it doesn't matter really whether the home is a council home in Stockport, like Angela had, or £1 million pad in London. The principle is, do you pay the capital gains tax or not? The other thing that's different here is Angela wasn't an MP at the time where she supposedly didn't pay capital gains tax. These people were MPs while they maybe didn't pay capital gains tax. John says the Tories just want to make everyone else as dirty as them. That's like the Boris Johnson trick, right? When Boris Johnson was editor of The Spectator, it became a sex-crazed, adulterous nest of vipers. When he was at Downing Street, it became the most immoral, rule-breaking address in the country. Wherever Boris Johnson goes, everyone around him just behaves so badly, they make him look not so bad. It's kind of a strange coincidence that comes out of being near Boris Johnson, it would appear. Now, we did say in the cell to this programme, and you've mentioned it, Kevin, that this has brought claims of Tory hypocrisy onto the party, but there's not much these days that doesn't, to be fair. And to be entirely fair, one of those Nicks found, David Tregennick, stood down from Parliament in 2019, so it's quite historic. And when it comes to flipping, we're just changing their second home designations for one reason or another, Labour politicians did that just as much as the Tories during the expenses scandal. There may be some in the Labour Party who've got the same questions to answer that Nick's asking the Tories here.
Yeah, you're quite right. Go back to the expenses scandal in 2009. Those cases that kind of made the headlines about duck houses and moats were Tory, but I can't remember the exact number of Labour MPs who went to prison. I think it was 5 or 6, including one who was falsifying mortgage payments. He paid off his mortgage. It was falsifying statements to put into expenses, pretending to still claim a mortgage. So yeah, no, absolutely. A couple of Tory peers also went to prison. So Labour had dirty hands back then. But the reason this is relevant, and you're quite right, there would have been Labour MPs in the past who could buy a house, claim the mortgage tax relief, then they could sell it and pocket the gains. And there would be questions, did they pay capital gains tax? But the reason this is relevant now is the Tories are asking the questions of Angela Rayner. Well, if you're asking the questions about the Angela Rayner, let's put your own house in order. Let's look at your own house. Let's see if you're sorted. You ask your own people, get them to tell. Now, all 4 may well have paid capital gains tax. I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing by them at all. What I am saying is, why will they not answer the questions when they're saying Angela Rayner must?
Exactly. There is this thing. It's the
produce
principle,
the evidence as well. Produce the evidence.
It's that principle as well. If you're relying on the fact that politicians don't have to talk about it, then politicians don't have to talk about it. You have to. You can't say it's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us. That's not how it works. Now, these are the ones, these 4, who refuse to answer the question. I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure that Nick will have had more on his list who did give him good reasons, who did have an answer, who therefore, didn't get included in the published story because fine, you did the right thing and you were honest. But it just sort of all adds up, doesn't it? It's the sort of the Tory brand we've got at the moment. It used to be a party of fiscal responsibility, hard work, pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of thing, grammar school boys. And now we've got this sort of sense of a party that's been corrupted by power, been in there too long. There's this whiff of decay and decline and rot just from the feet up and their head down. Do you think there's going to be a few more Tories, I mean, perhaps even some in the cabinet, who'll be feeling a bit itchy about where this investigation might go next? I'm sure this isn't all Nick's got in his notebook.
Yeah, I think it was always a myth that the Tories were the party of fiscal responsibility and pulling themselves up by the bootstraps. I just name David Cameron, Rishi Sunak, married an heiress. Yeah, anyway, I guess, you know, a national debt is about 2.5 times now what they inherited in 2010. Right, but there are some cabinet ministers who are very uneasy about their hounding of Angela Rayner, because they know her story. They also feel that, you know, Michael Ashcroft, Lord Ashcroft, a billionaire, own controversial tax affairs. Is he still a non-dom? If he's making some allegations, that's wrong. The Daily Mail on Sunday have picked it up. Their owner is believed to be a non-dom, and they're registered in tax havens to avoid what I would consider fair dues in this country. So the people chucking the rotten tomatoes at Angela Rayner, you know, they certainly haven't got clean hands. But what some Tories do say, though, is, Foxy, that excuse me, Angela Rayner was always quick for other people calling for Tories to quit when they were facing accusations rather than have been found guilty of anything, and that can boomerang on you as a politician. Yeah,
it doesn't always land well, does it? So I suppose that, I mean, what do you think, everybody? Do you think this is damaging Angela Rayner? Do you think this is you know, more of an issue for her? Is it going to affect whether or not you vote Labour or Tory at the next election? Is it something that perhaps you expect the Tory party, but you don't expect to the Labour party? Although, you know, if Labour have done anything wrong here, it's tiny amounts compared to the millions that Tories might be involved with. Sean says Tories are trying to find dirt in Angela when they're filthy themselves. Has this kind of sense that all of Westminster is corrupt, when they're not really. But I suppose the question is where we go next with this, Kevin. You know, can the Tories keep on refusing to comment if Nick or the Mirror or other people keep asking these questions? Because I'm sure they'll be asking in the lobby briefing today a Prime Minister's spokesman about this, and it'll keep going on a bit. Can a Mirror investigation really have the same kind of impact? I mean, it doesn't come in a book written by a Tory billionaire donor. You know, that's just not going to have. Will it perhaps make, I don't know, the Daily Mail just go a little bit quieter? They've been screaming for Angela's scalp for weeks. If there's another paper that's going, well, hang on, the Tories are actually quite significantly maybe worse, is that going to make the Mail calm down a bit? I mean, where do we go next?
No, they're going to look at it very one-eyed, I think, and then see what they want. They have got a bit quiet on anyway, because they were looking, quite frankly, deranged. The length of time they were putting it on their front page, because her fate now is in the hands of the Greater Manchester Police Inquiry, and then whatever the Crown Prosecution Service judge, I would say. But in terms of a police inquiry, you've got the person who lives in the house now and bought it from, the person who bought it from Angela Rayner, saying, look, I still get post for her. So of course she lived here. She moved out 9 years ago. I'm still getting post for her. But then you get other neighbours saying, no, she was never around. She was elsewhere, and so on. I think if she turns up to the Greater Manchester Police Inquiry, which I would have thought they have better things to do, about a dozen coppers on this case. It's utterly ludicrous and disproportionate. She turns up from those years when she owned that house, she turns up with a council tax bill, a water bill, a gas electricity bill, insurance bill, all showing her name on that property, paying those bills. Then I would have thought it's just shut. Just leave it out, unless you're really just hounding at, and you're just determined to nail somebody, no matter what the lack of evidence is.
Yeah, and to be fair, even if they did find somehow against Angela, I mean, she said that she would stand down if she was found to have done anything wrong, but it's going to be a piddling amount in the great scheme of things.
But if you say you're going to stand down, she must have been pretty confident of her a position to say that, because if you're found some little breach, you're right, it might be a piddling amount, but then you're gone. That's why I think she must be very, very confident.
I think, just before we move on to good news, I think it's one of those signs, really, like we've got now this party, like I was saying, decline and decay. That fin de siècle, kind of end of an era, really, what we got going on with the Tory party at the moment. But if they're spending so much time throwing dirt at Natalie Elphicke, throwing dirt at Angela Rayner, it just indicates it's not a party that's confident in itself, that feels like it's still going to keep power. Rishi Sunak seems to be the only person blindly saying everything's fine, everything's fine.
But it's an old
the actions of a party on its way out, isn't it?
It's an old tactic of the Conservatives and the right in general, and part of the left has got to be is you just say all politicians are the same, all parties are the same, doesn't matter what you do. When I don't think that's the case. I think there are decent, upstanding Conservatives I know who I disagree with, but I think they're publicly spirited and clean, and the others are sleazy. And then there are some Labour people I'd cross the road to avoid.
Yeah, that's it's one of the things I always say to my journalism students. It doesn't matter how you vote now. Once you actually go and speak to some politicians and interview them and actually get to know them and everything else, you have an entirely different way of looking at the world. It's not quite as black and white as you might think. Perhaps there's one or two people camped out on campuses right now who could bear that in mind.